By the Great Northern Company, cool got here, video, clear. Welcome to Seafarers, and today we're looking at the impact of decarbonisation on seafarers. And there's a new report by the International Seafarers Welfare and Assistance Network, ISWAN, which has just come out. And I'm absolutely delighted today that I have Chirag from ISWAN. Chirag, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Julia. It's a pleasure to be here.
I know you're actually at a conference in the Philippines at the moment. So thank you very much for finding some time while you're in Manila to join us.
Thank you. It's our pleasure to be part of this event and also to share the findings of this survey report.
And also, I understand that this research has been sponsored by the Shipowners Club. And I'd like to welcome Ian Grainger. Thank you very much, Ian, for coming from the Shipowners Club and joining us.
Yes, thank you, Julia. Thank you for inviting me on. It's an important topic for Shipowners Club, so we're really happy to be involved in it.
Great. And Adam Parnell from Chirp, Adam's with us today as well. So we've got a bit of a party today. The report's just come out. Chirag, your organisation, ISWAN, has commissioned this research. It's looking at the impact on seafarers. Could you give me a bit of an overview of what it's about, this research that's just come out?
Yeah. So basically, ISWAN has been interacting with the seafarers both via seafarer helplines as well as because of our international work in India and in the Philippines. We came through our discussions with the seafarers and that, we were getting more concerned about that. There are findings that seafarers were finding it difficult to cope up with the additional pressures and stresses that are coming onto them because of the urgent need to decarbonize. Although decarbonization is absolutely necessary, but at the same time, we felt there is some gaps out there which is affecting their health and well-being. And that's how we looked at that to do a small survey to ask the seafarers and also the shore staff in the maritime sector about the impact of this rapid adoption of new technologies and regulatory regimes, what the impact of that is having on their mental health and job satisfaction.
Ian, you have supported this. Do you want to tell me a little bit about what this means for your organisation and why you've supported it?
Yes, of course. As Chirag's already touched on, climate change is such an important factor in the sustainability of the shipping industry. It has to matter to the seafarer as well. It has to work for the seafarer as well. And that's something that ISWAN have really looked into here. For the club, a happy ship is a safe ship. We truly believe that. We want our seafarers to be happy and healthy on board. We think it does drive safety at sea. So this research is really helping us where we can improve that happiness and healthiness on board.
Yeah, and it's something that we covered in a previous podcast, that the drive to decarbonisation, that we do need to try and make sure that the seafarer isn't left behind or cut out of the process, because some of the alternative fuels, they do have their own sort of risks and dangers. Great. So I believe you've had quite a good response. You've had a good number of international respondents to this, haven't you, Chirag?
Yes, absolutely. So the survey was carried out online basis and we have got about 400 responses from about 29 different nationalities, majority from India and the Philippines. But then also we got responses from a number of chief engineers and the engineers and also from the deck officers in the survey. Apart from that, the survey was also opened for the shore staff. And we got about 55 responses from the shore staff covering from 17 different nationalities who took part in the survey.
Yeah, it's a really good international selection, isn't it? You've done this research now. It's just literally come out very recently, the report. Tell us what have been the most interesting or surprising findings for you.
One of the key things was about the majority of the seafarers demonstrated that they support the decarbonization process in all together. So I think that very much, they have shared that more than 51% of the seafarers, they mentioned that they really want to support in any ways and any form the decarbonization process. It's only that what they are looking at, that how the process of decarbonization they want to have So they want to be involved a bit more and needs to have a more human centered approach rather than, they're feeling like they're not been part of in the entire process. So I think that's something very relevant into this survey report.
What kind of impact have you measured?
If we look at the survey, we look at it, nearly 70% of the respondents, reported that the environmental regulations relating to decarbonization have a big impact on their work. And actually the impact was higher for amongst the more engineering officers than those responsible and those respondents without a fixed trading pattern. So that again demonstrated that the need to look into that how the seafarers are having more stresses around the fatigue, as well as the levels of stress levels are increasing on the seafarers. Over 40% of the respondents, they mentioned that there's an increase in levels of stress and nearly around the same thing around for the fatigue as well. But I think that just under half of respondents, they also reported that the introduction of decarbonization regulations and technologies had not had a positive impact on any of the well-being areas, including in the survey. I think that's something which we really need to focus a bit more, that the workload, stress, and the fatigue levels have increased because of that.
Yeah. So this isn't just because it's something new coming. A significant number of people are reporting that it's a workload issue in particular.
Absolutely. I think it's more of like people are not very prepared to handle all this, the techno stress which is happening, the rapid pace of advanced technological changes that are happening along with your work pressures. So that is actually leading to this kind of stresses that are coming on to the seafarers.
I do like the term techno stress. I know it's not obviously very pleasant for anyone suffering from it, but I feel like I got a lot of techno stress during COVID, when we all had to start learning different platforms and things that we needed to use in COVID. But this is on a different scale, isn't it, for the seafarers over the next 10, 15 years?
Absolutely. I think this is a reality that we need to accept, that the techno stress is going to be there. We just need to see that how are we going to adapt to it? Are we going to bring it into our culture and our role as, the skills that we need to develop to handle these kind of stresses that are coming into.
Can we measure, or can you get any indication of physical impacts, safety impacts?
Well, I think in the survey itself, the seafarers have mentioned about that how difficult it has been for them to take care of the additional pressures that are having on them. For example, the equipments and the maintenance part of the things, they have to change to handle different kind of fuel oils now. And they have different regulatory framework altogether, and they have to prepare the tanks. They have mentioned about the machineries are not ready for that particular type of fuel, which they have been asked to do. So what kind of, all of these are having a lot more physical impact on them as well. The number of crew are actually decreasing. There are not enough crew on board to do additional work. And this all is impacting their overall, the physical health as well.
Ian, from your perspective, in terms of risk, which you look at, people, they are a significant part of your risk and what you try and, reduce the risk, don't you? So what are you taking out of these findings?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting what Chirag said before, that it's not all bad that we talk about in this report. There are some positive sides of it. One of the things that came up is that a lot of these ships are modern, they're fitted with better technologies and are safer. And obviously that improves the risk from our side, but it also improves the risk for the seafarers. But there is that psychological element as well when you're working with technologies that you haven't worked with before, that psychologically you believe it to be riskier, and therefore it, puts higher stresses on the seafarers. Fatigue is something that comes across regularly in our incidents that we look at. And workload as well. So anything that is increasing workload and fatigue and stress to seafarers, of course, makes shipping more dangerous.
Yeah, we touched on fatigue before, haven't we, and the dangers of that, Adam?
Yes, we have. And I was really intrigued in the report that techno stress, that it was the perception of extra workload that had as much damage and caused as much stress as the actual workload, the increased workload. So it was almost like a double whammy on the seafarers. Was that right?
Yeah, I believe that's correct. I think that perception of the risk and of the workload is something that does affect seafarers. What came across as well was the fact that the engineers were reporting such a higher level. And I did read one comment which made me laugh as a former master, that the deck officers just have to fill in one extra piece of paper, whereas the engineers have all this extra work to do with the engineering. I think that's slightly unfair on what deck officers actually do, but I do think there is part of that there, that engineers have suddenly been faced with all these new changes, a huge new structure on board, plus paperwork to go with it. So, it is impacting them.
Was there any feeling that the paperwork was being filled out for paperwork's sake, Chirag, or is it just these new fuels intrinsically require additional paperwork? And do you think that paperwork workload will drop off with time, or do you think it will increase?
Well, I think the paperwork is going to be there, I feel. And whatever the seafarers are actually mentioning is about more of like, they're not confident of that the fuel which has been carried. They feel like experiments are going on actually on board right now. And that's why they're not thinking that they're part of it entirely. And nobody has the real answers right now. What is the next fuel it's going to be very frank. Amidst of all of these things, here comes that we are doing different experiments on board. And obviously there will be a lot of paperwork. There will be a lot of changes that will be happening, whether this works, whether this doesn't work, and all of that. And amidst of all of that, the seafarers are finding it very tough right now to look at that. Hey, on one side, we want to get the changes, but on the other side, we are used as experimental ships on board. We don't have a proper testing ashore as well. And all of that is actually putting, as what Ian mentioned, what the psychologically safe environment is not there on board where they can feel. And there's also additional pressures around the decarbonization aspects, which also was highlighted in the report. CPS feeling that using, there are different regulatory frameworks in different countries, which is why the seafarers are feeling that whether they will be used or they will be criminalized in some of these areas in using different fuels and different technologies, whether they are adapting to or their ships are been adapted to that technology which a country requires or not. So all of these, I think, are adding a lot of these pressures, and that will keep going on unless we have a very standardized regulatory framework.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good clarion call. And again, it comes back to the risks associated with the fuel, I guess, have not yet been sufficiently well communicated to crews to provide them with that level of reassurance, which is probably leading to that psychological stress. But you touch on something in terms of criminalization of the seafarer, which is actually we're seeing increasingly happening. And that's a real fear. I would suggest your call for alignment of regulatory processes, because of course we see this, and with something off topic, I know, but as simple as a pilot ladder, because there are different interpretations of the same regulation, vessels then end up rigging something that isn't to port A or port B's liking. And of course, that's something simple. When we start talking about something as complex as a new fuel system and an entire propulsion system, that's magnified 100-fold. And so I can see people's very real fear and almost not wanting to do anything, the fear of doing it wrong and getting criminalized as a result.
Sorry, just to answer that, Adam, I think that the criminalization side of it, this kind of follows from what you said about paperwork earlier as well. It might not be paperwork for paperwork's sake, but it's also very different every port you go to. And nobody wants to feel that because they've forgotten to fill in one form or because they filled in a form for the wrong port, that they're at risk of fines or even worse, and criminalization of this crew on board.
It's really interesting. Yeah, you say that. Actually, when I talk to harbour masters, the sort of other end of the telescope, as it were, as ports, they're really concerned about these new fuels and about vessels coming in because, again, the lack of regulatory oversight and direction and guidance in many countries is actually leading to ports and harbours almost making this up on the fly and trying to do that. I mean, let's be honest, everybody here is trying to do the best they can with what they've got. And so, I can see why the conditions have arisen that ports ask for different things. It's because in many, even nationally, there isn't central guidance, let alone internationally.
You've got the majority of seafarers have said that they do welcome the moves towards decarbonisation in that they support it. But you've also got the majority of them saying that it's having a negative impact on their workload. Now, combined with the effects on their mental health at work, what do you see coming next if seafarers need to be better involved in the process?
So I think we need to have a human-centered approach to all of these things, I think both seafarers and the shore staff, they've very well stated that improving the technology systems and processes, I think they would like to be part of this entire transition to zero carbon. But at the same time, how we can protect them against the techno stress and how we can work on them to ensure that there is a just culture, ensuring that stress management trainings as well as the mental health trainings have been part of it. How we can valorize the seafarers, how we can ensure that there are sufficient crewing models available. Again, we need to make sure that how it is impacting the retention of seafarers in the maritime industry. Is this a cause that the seafarers are going to leave the industry, or this is something which is making them difficult to continue their careers in shipping? All of that, I think we need a little bit more, additional research on the crewing models and all that, everything we need to do a bit more. And I think we have to just proactively build some collaborative ways because we are all in this together, isn't it? We are all in the same side in combating the climate breakdown. So we can't single out the seafarers or the shipping industry altogether into all of these things. So as I said earlier, we need to harmonize the reporting regimes and the regulatory framework around it as well to ensure that the future of seafarers looks, attractive and seafarers feel like they're part of it and they're committed to this zero carbon initiatives.
Yeah. Or there could be quite a recruitment and retention issue, couldn't there? Yeah. Ian, what are you taking away from this in terms of the insurance and the risk side of things and how you can protect your members, people, the seafarers? What are you taking from the report?
I think something that Chirag touched on there and something that we're fully behind is this just culture on board. We believe the safety culture and the culture on board vessels is the primary driver of the safety on board vessels. And by implementing a just culture, one that doesn't look to blame seafarers when things go wrong, but seeks to learn off them instead, and listening to seafarers, we can make this far more human-centered. I think it's something that by involving seafarers in the processes, whether that's the processes between the shore staff and the seafarers or between the seafarers and the regulatory bodies, we can make everything work for everybody. Like Chirag said, we're all on the same side here and everybody wants the same thing, but it just has to work for people. The retention is an interesting point. I know you touched on that as well, Chirag. Whether the retention of seafarers is improved or not by this. We do see a trend, according to the survey from shore staff, to say it actually improves retention. I think everybody wants to be working in an industry that isn't damaging to the planet, that has a long-term future, and that drives the retention on the shore side. If we can get the same sentiment through to the seafarers, would that increase retention? Because longer serving crews and crews that are working on fixed trades and crews that are working on the same ships for a long time are safer. They tend to work better together. They tend to know how to react in an emergency. So if we can improve retention by getting that sentiment through to seafarers as well, that would be really good for the industry.
Based on what you've now found out and the insight you've got, is there an intention to look at future research, or are you still digesting?
This research will have a full report written up later in the year by Chris Houghton. So keep an eye out for that because it will be coming later this year. From our side at Shipowners, we have introduced new KPIs in the surveys that we perform on ships to look at seafarer well-being and to look at decarbonisation as well. And internally decide how that's impacted safety on board ships and where we can go from there. And we have quite a lot of work about decarbonisation on our website, which, we welcome all listeners to take a look at, which really does look at the safety of different fuels and where we can go with them.
Great. Well, we can signpost to those resources and obviously to the full report. We will as well in the CBU show notes. Adam, do you have any further questions?
No, I do. And actually, it very much relates to the one that Ian's just asked or mentioned, which is about learning from experience and having a just culture. We in Chirp very often point the finger at industry for saying that all this learning, and right now with novel fuels and decarbonisation, we are all on a big learning journey. The trouble we see is that learning is retained within company firewalls, boundaries, if you like. And there are, obviously, I would say this, wouldn't I? There are very few people and organizations that are able and willing to share data beyond that boundary for fear of reputational or commercial damage. And yet, to me, this is one area where I think to ensure safety, we absolutely must see companies sharing and learning lessons from each other and actually being honest. And I think that is a real vital part of just culture. And, the clubs, etc., Ian, I think, and as well as ship owners, all have a big part to play in that. And in the absence of any likely international mandation to that effect, I think it's more a moral imperative more than anything else.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I think that this gets mentioned a lot in seafaring circles, that you take a look at aviation and see that the aviation industry spreads safety lessons throughout the entire industry, which just doesn't happen to anywhere near the same effect in the shipping industry. And as you say, clubs are at a hub where, collect this information from worldwide memberships and are in an ideal place to disseminate the information as well. It's something that we do try to do. We have case studies, we put out safety information and safety bulletins that do come from our learning that we've taken in. And we also, we sit on forums, we do talk about these things on a wider scale. But I agree that anything we can do to share the lessons that we learn wider than they're already shared is beneficial to the industry.
Well, I hope so. And it's really heartening to hear that's happening to that extent. And, I think that's the only way. If we only did that for fuels, that would still be a huge step in the right direction.
Yeah.
But let's hope they do it for other things as well.
Yeah, ask for one thing at once.
Absolutely.
Oh, great. Okay, well, thank you so much to my guest, Chirag, and to Ian for joining us today, because it's very timely that this research has come out about decarbonisation. And as I said, we'll share that link to the report. And I think it would be great to get this to a wider audience and get the dialogue going as well about the impact on seafarers. So thank you. This has been a short but very timely Sea Views podcast episode. I'm going to ring the bell and we will leave the bridge. Great moment, Coast Guard here. Clear.